Maverick Calloway stood at the edge of his infinity pool, staring out at the Pacific Ocean as the California sun began its descent. At 31, he was already worth more than most people would make in several lifetimes. The pristine white walls of his Malibu villa gleamed in the golden hour light, every surface immaculate, every object precisely where it should be. That's how Maverick liked things: controlled, perfect, predictable. The familiar ping of an email notification broke his reverie. Without looking at his phone, he knew it would be about the Singapore merger. It was always about some merger, some acquisition, some deal that couldn't wait until morning. Calloway Innovations had become a tech empire under his leadership, expanding from a modest startup in his college dorm room to a multinational corporation that was changing how the world communicated. "Mr. Calloway, your conference call is scheduled in 15 minutes, came the voice of his home assistant system, a technology his own company had pioneered. Maverick sighed, running a hand through his dark hair as he turned away from the view. He couldn't remember the last time he'd watched a sunset without thinking about work. His footsteps echoed against Italian marble as he made his way back inside. The villa was nearly 17,000 square feet of architectural brilliance, featured twice in Architectural Digest, and completely empty save for himself and occasionally his housekeeper, Eloise. Friends had become business associates. Relationships had become strategic partnerships. Even his family had become distant, put off by his relentless ambition and the person it had turned him into. His father's words from their last conversation still haunted him. "You've built an empire, but you're ruling over nothing." Maverick settled into his home office, a space dominated by sleek glass and steel. Awards and recognitions lined the walls, testament to his business acumen and innovative spirit. What they didn't show was the cost. The broken engagement to Valencia 3 years ago. The missed funerals and birthdays. The friendships that had withered from neglect. He glanced at the small digital frame on his desk, the only personal item in the room. It cycled through photos from before the billions, before Calloway Innovations had consumed his identity. There he was, 22, wild-eyed and hopeful in a cramped apartment with his co-founders, Hudson and Piper. Hudson had left the company after their first major success, choosing family over fortune. Piper had stayed longer but eventually departed when Maverick refused to consider her warnings about their expanding surveillance technology division. The quiet of the villa was suddenly broken by the chime of the gate intercom. Maverick frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone, and his assistant Dominic knew better than to schedule in-person meetings at the villa. "Sir, there's someone at the gate," announced the AI assistant. "A child, according to the security scan. No adults visible in proximity." Maverick's frown deepened. "A child? Here." His property was hidden behind high walls and a state-of-the-art security system, accessible only via a private road. "Display visual," he commanded, and a holographic screen appeared before him, showing the gate camera feed. Indeed, there stood a small figure, a girl no more than 11 or 12, with copper-colored hair falling in waves past her shoulders. She wore a simple blue dress and looked directly at the camera as if she knew exactly where it was. Most strangely, she showed no signs of distress or uncertainty. She simply waited, one hand clutching something at her neck. Curiosity, an emotion Maverick rarely indulged these days, got the better of him. "Security scan?" he requested. "No weapons detected. Subject appears to be approximately 11 years of age. No other individuals detected within a 100-yard radius." Maverick hesitated, then made a decision that would alter the course of his meticulously planned life. "Open the pedestrian gate and direct her to the front entrance." The AI acknowledged his command, and Maverick watched as the small gate beside the main entrance slid open. The girl didn't hesitate, stepping through with purpose and following the lit path to his front door. There was something about her confident demeanor that was both intriguing and vaguely unsettling. By the time the doorbell rang, Maverick had moved to the grand foyer, still keeping a safe distance from the entrance. "Open," he commanded, and the massive door slid silently open. The girl stood on his doorstep, her green eyes taking in the cavernous entry hall without a trace of awe or intimidation. Up close, Maverick could see that what she clutched at her neck was a locket, an antique-looking oval on a delicate chain. "Hello, Mr. Calloway," she said, her voice clear and steady, lacking the timidity one might expect from a child facing a stranger. "My name is Ren. I believe you've been waiting for me, though you might not have known it." Maverick felt a chill that had nothing to do with the villa's perfect climate control. There was something in her direct gaze that seemed far older than her years. "I don't know you," he said simply, maintaining his composure despite his confusion. "And I don't make a habit of meeting with uninvited guests, especially children who should be with their parents. How did you find this place? Ren smiled, a small knowing expression that only deepened the mystery. The question isn't how I found your house, Mr. Calloway. The question is why it took me so long to find you. Maverick studied the girl for a long moment, his business instincts telling him to send her away immediately. Yet something, perhaps it was those unervingly steady green eyes, made him hesitate. Does your family know you're here? He asked, stepping aside reluctantly to allow her entry. The marble foyer dwarfed her small frame, making her look even more out of place among the minimalist decor and towering ceilings. Ren glanced around, taking in the space before returning her gaze to him. I don't have a family anymore. Not in the traditional sense, she replied, with the matter-of-factness of someone discussing the weather rather than their orphaned state. But I'm not here to discuss my circumstances. I'm here about yours. The audacity of her statement nearly made Maverick laugh. What could this child possibly know about his circumstances? My circumstances are none of your concern, he said coolly. And you still haven't explained how you found this place or why you're here. Ren's fingers tightened around the locket at her neck, and for the first time, Maverick noticed a flicker of uncertainty cross her face. This led me to you, she said, holding up the locket without removing it from her neck. It was an ornate oval, clearly antique, with intricate engravings that seemed to shimmer in the recessed lighting of the foyer. I know this sounds impossible, but it's the truth. And I'm here because you need help, even if you don't realize it yet. Maverick crossed his arms, his patience wearing thin. I don't need help, especially not from a child who's trespassing on my property. What I need is to get back to my work, and you need to go home, wherever that is. He reached for his phone. I'm calling someone to escort you back. Princeton University, 2014, Ren said suddenly. Maverick's finger halted over his phone screen. You were giving a guest lecture on emerging technologies. A student asked what you thought the greatest threat to humanity was in the digital age. Do you remember what you said? Maverick's mouth went dry. He did remember that lecture, though he couldn't recall ever seeing this girl there. She would have been a toddler then. I said the greatest threat wasn't technology itself, he replied slowly, watching her face, but our willingness to trade deep human connection for convenience and distraction. Ren nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. You also said something else. You said, the most dangerous loss isn't privacy, it's purpose. That's what brought me here, Mr. Calloway. You've lost your purpose. The accusation, delivered so matter-of-factly, struck Maverick like a physical blow. His instinct was to dismiss her, to have his security system escort her off the property, but curiosity, that increasingly rare emotion, kept him rooted in place. How could you possibly know what I said at that lecture? He demanded. You would have been, what, a baby? Ren's gaze never wavered. The locket shows me things. Important moments. Turning points. I've seen many of yours. She held it up again, and this time Maverick looked more closely. The oval pendant seemed to contain some kind of stone or crystal at its center, partially visible through the filigree work. It didn't glow or do anything supernatural, yet something about it drew his attention. That's impossible, he said flatly, though with less conviction than he intended. Is it? Ren challenged, taking a step toward him. Just like it was impossible that a college dropout would revolutionize quantum encryption before he turned 25? Just like it was impossible that Calloway Innovations would surpass Horizon Tech without external investors? You've built your entire life on achieving the impossible, Mr. Calloway. She was right, of course. His meteoric rise had defied all conventional wisdom. People had been telling him what was impossible since he'd started coding at age 8. That didn't mean he believed in magic lockets, but it did make him curious enough to hear more. Come with me, he said abruptly, turning toward the sprawling living area. If you're going to tell me fairy tales, we might as well be comfortable. The living room, like the rest of the villa, was a testament to modern luxury, all clean lines and strategic emptiness, with floor-to-ceiling windows framing the ocean view. Maverick gestured to one of the white leather sofas, and Ren perched on its edge, her feet barely touching the floor. Would you like something to drink? He asked, more out of ingrained politeness than genuine hospitality. Water, please, she replied. As Maverick moved to the integrated bar to fetch her water, he noticed that Ren was looking at a particular spot on the wall, a spot where, until recently, a painting had hung. Valencia had left it behind when she'd moved out, and he'd finally had it removed last month, unable to stand the reminder of what might have been. There used to be a painting there, Ren said, pointing to the exact spot. A modern piece, mostly blues and golds. Valencia chose it for you because she said your home needed something that wasn't functional, something that existed purely for beauty's sake. Maverick nearly dropped the glass he was holding. He turned slowly, fixing Ren with a stare that had made tech executives and venture capitalists squirm. How do you know about Valencia? He asked, his voice dangerously quiet. No one knew the details of his broken engagement. He'd managed to keep it out of the press, and the few friends who knew anything had signed NDAs. I told you, Ren replied, seeming immune to his intimidating gaze. The locket shows me things. Important moments. I've seen her leave. I've seen your father tell you that you've built an empire but rule over nothing. I've seen you stare at the founding team photo and wonder where it all went wrong. Maverick set the water down on the coffee table with more force than necessary, causing some to splash over the rim. This isn't amusing anymore, he said coldly. You've obviously researched me, maybe talked to someone who used to work for me. I don't know what your angle is, but I've had enough. Ren didn't reach for the water. Instead, she unclasped the locket from around her neck, holding it in her palm. I understand your skepticism. I would feel the same in your position. But I can prove what I'm saying is true. She held out the locket to him. Hold it. Just for a moment. If nothing happens, I'll leave and never bother you again. Maverick looked at the offered locket with suspicion. This had to be some kind of elaborate scam, though he couldn't fathom the purpose. Perhaps industrial espionage? Was the locket bugged or designed to infect his home systems? But their conversation had been strange enough that his curiosity, that dangerous, long-dormant trait, was fully awakened now. He extended his hand and Ren dropped the locket into his palm. It was heavier than it looked, warm from her skin. The intricate engravings seemed to shift slightly in the light, creating an illusion of movement. Nothing happened for several seconds, and Maverick was about to hand it back with a dismissive comment when the sensation hit him. It wasn't a flashback exactly, more like a memory being projected directly into his consciousness. He was suddenly aware of standing in a hospital waiting room, the antiseptic smell sharp in his nostrils. The overhead fluorescence buzzed, and a clock on the wall read 3:17 a.m. His hands were shaking as he stared at his phone, at the dozens of missed calls from his mother. He'd been in Tokyo finalizing the Nakamura deal, when his father had suffered the massive heart attack. By the time Maverick had received the news and chartered the private jet home, it was already too late. His father had been gone for hours. The memory or vision shifted, and now he could see his mother's face, pale with grief and something else, disappointment. He asked for you, she'd said, her voice hollow. At the end. He asked if you were coming. The locket slipped from Maverick's suddenly numb fingers, landing silently on the plush carpet. He stumbled backward, collapsing onto the opposite sofa. What? His voice cracked and he cleared his throat. What was that? Ren retrieved the locket, her expression solemn as she fastened it back around her neck. The locket shows truth. Not just what happened but how it felt. The moments that shape us. She watched him carefully. Your father's death was one of those moments for you. You buried yourself in work afterward. The Singapore merger, the Callaway Nexus launch, all of it was to avoid facing what you lost. Maverick's breathing was ragged now, his carefully constructed composure crumbling. This is impossible, he whispered, but the denial sounded hollow even to his own ears. The impossible seems to find you, Mr. Callaway, Ren replied, her voice gentler now. Just as I have. She finally reached for the water glass, taking a small sip before continuing. I didn't choose to come to you. The locket did. It's been showing me your life for weeks now. Your triumphs. Your losses. The path that led you to this beautiful empty house and the loneliness that fills it. Maverick wanted to be angry at her presumption, but the emotion wouldn't come. Instead, he felt exposed, as if this strange child had peeled back his carefully constructed exterior and glimpsed the hollow center beneath. What do you want from me? He asked, his voice barely audible over the subtle hum of the house systems. Ren set the glass down carefully, aligning it with the edge of the coaster. It's not about what I want. It's about what you need. She looked up at him, those old soul eyes penetrating. You've achieved everything you thought you wanted, but you've never stopped to ask yourself why none of it makes you happy. Why you keep acquiring and building and expanding, always searching for something that stays just out of reach. She touched the locket again, a gesture that seemed almost unconscious. The locket has brought us together for a reason, Mr. Callaway. And I think that reason is to help you find what you've lost. The irony wasn't lost on Maverick. Here he was, one of the most powerful men in the tech industry, being lectured about his life choices by a child. And yet, something about her words resonated in a way that his therapists never had. "And what exactly have I lost, according to your magical locket?" he asked, unable to keep a hint of sarcasm from his tone, despite the unsettling experience he'd just had. Ren didn't seem bothered by his skepticism. "Connection," she said simply. "Real human connection. Not the superficial kind that fills your calendar with meetings and your inbox with messages. The kind that actually matters." Maverick stood abruptly, moving to the wall of windows. The sun had fully set now, and the ocean beyond was a vast darkness punctuated by the distant lights of ships. "You don't know me," he said, his back to her. "One parlor trick with that locket doesn't change that fact. I know that when you were 11, my age, you built your first computer from parts you salvaged from your neighbor's trash," Ren said, her voice carrying across the room. "I know that when you were 15, you hacked into your school system to change the lunch menu because your best friend, Zachary Weiss, was allergic to peanuts and the cafeteria kept serving them. I know that your mother taught piano lessons to put you through college, and that you still can't hear Debussy without thinking of her." Each revelation was like a needle piercing the bubble of denial Maverick was trying to maintain. He turned slowly to face her, finding it increasingly difficult to dismiss her as a scam artist or a hallucination. "How could you possibly know all that?" he whispered. "I told you," Ren replied patiently. "The locket shows me things. Important things. Things that matter." She stood, smoothing down her blue dress. "I know you don't believe in magic or fate or anything you can't quantify, Mr. Calloway. That's part of what's made you successful. But some truths exist beyond algorithms and data points." She walked toward him, stopping a few feet away. "You don't have to believe in the locket. You just have to believe that there's more to life than what you've allowed yourself to experience these past few years." The rational part of Maverick's mind was still searching for explanations. Maybe she was an especially convincing con artist, or perhaps this was an elaborate prank orchestrated by a former colleague. Yet another part of him, a part he'd neglected for years, was responding to her words with an uncomfortable recognition. "Let's say hypothetically that I believe you," he said, choosing his words carefully. "What exactly am I supposed to do with this information? Sell all my assets and go live in a commune? Donate everything to charity? What's the end game here?" Ren shook her head, a small smile playing at her lips. "Those solutions are as superficial as the problem. This isn't about your money or your company. It's about you, the person you've forgotten how to be." She glanced at the smart display on the wall, which showed the time. 7:42 p.m. "You missed your conference call," she observed. Maverick blinked, having completely forgotten about the Singapore investors waiting on the other end of a virtual meeting room. For the first time in years he found he didn't care. "They'll reschedule," he said dismissively. "They always do." A silence fell between them, filled only by the gentle hum of the villa's systems and the distant sound of waves against the shoreline below. Maverick found himself at a rare loss for words. His entire adult life had been built on certainty, on data and facts and measurable outcomes. This child and her inexplicable knowledge defied every logical framework he possessed. "Are you hungry?" he asked suddenly, the question surprising even himself. Ren's face brightened, a glimpse of the actual child beneath the old soul demeanor. "Starving, actually. I walked a long way to get here." Maverick nodded, grateful for the practical distraction. "The kitchen is this way." He led her through the house, past rooms filled with expensive furniture that had never known the weight of guests, past walls adorned with art chosen by interior designers rather than personal preference. The kitchen was a marvel of modern design, all stainless steel and smart appliances with a massive island at its center. Like the rest of the house, it was immaculate and barely used. Maverick couldn't remember the last time he'd actually cooked here. Most of his meals were either prepared by Eloise when she was working or delivered from high-end restaurants. He opened the massive refrigerator, surveying its sparse contents. "I don't have much," he admitted. "I wasn't expecting company." Ren peered around him into the refrigerator. "You have eggs," she pointed out. "And cheese. And, is that bacon?" Maverick nodded, somewhat embarrassed by how little food he kept in a kitchen that could have served a restaurant. "Breakfast for dinner?" Ren suggested, and there was something so charmingly normal about the request that Maverick found himself nodding again. "I must warn you, I'm not much of a cook," he said, pulling out the ingredients. "My skills are pretty much limited to scrambled eggs and toast." Ren smiled, hoisting herself onto one of the bar stools at the island. "That sounds perfect. I can help if you want." Maverick waved off her offer, strangely determined to provide this simple meal himself. As he moved around the kitchen, cracking eggs and slicing bread, he felt an odd sense of purpose, different from the driving ambition that fueled his business decisions, softer somehow. "So," he said, whisking the eggs with more force than necessary, "you still haven't told me where you live or who's taking care of you." Wren swung her legs, watching him work. "I stay at Briar House," she said. "It's a group home for girls. About 20 miles from here." Maverick paused in his whisking. "A group home? You're in foster care?" Wren nodded matter-of-factly. "Since I was 7. My parents died in a car accident. There were no relatives who could take me." She said it without self-pity, as if reciting facts from someone else's life. "I'm sorry," Maverick said, feeling the inadequacy of the words. He thought of his own privileged childhood. Comfortable home, supportive parents, every advantage money could buy. "It's okay," Wren replied, fingering her locket again. "It happened a long time ago. 4 years," Maverick calculated. Not so long when measured against a child's life. "The home is nice enough," she continued. "Mrs. Grayson, who runs it, is kind. But it's temporary. Everything in foster care is temporary." The eggs sizzled as Maverick poured them into the hot pan, the familiar sound oddly comforting in the midst of this surreal evening. "Won't they be worried about you?" he asked, suddenly concerned about the legal implications of having an unaccompanied minor in his home. "Tonight is movie night," Wren explained. "They won't take attendance until 9. I'll be missed eventually, but not for a while yet." Maverick frowned as he stirred the eggs. "That doesn't seem like adequate supervision for children." Wren shrugged. "There are 18 girls and 3 staff members. They do their best, but they can't watch everyone all the time." There was no accusation in her tone, just a simple acknowledgement of reality. Maverick plated the finished eggs, bacon, and toast, sliding one plate across the island to Wren and keeping the other for himself. He couldn't remember the last time he'd shared a meal with someone in this kitchen. Perhaps never. Valencia had always preferred dining out, and business meetings happened in restaurants or conference rooms. "Aren't you afraid?" he asked, watching as Wren dug into her food with enthusiasm. "Coming to a stranger's house like this? You must know that's dangerous." Wren looked up from her plate, those unervingly direct eyes meeting his. "The locket wouldn't lead me to danger," she said with complete conviction. "Besides, you're not a stranger to me, not really. I've seen so much of your life already." Maverick picked at his own food, appetite diminished by the strangeness of the situation. "Even if what you're saying about the locket is true, and I'm not saying I believe it, it doesn't explain why you're here." "Why me? Why now?" Wren chewed thoughtfully before answering. "The locket has its own wisdom. It connects people who need each other, though they might not realize it at first." She took another bite of toast. "As for why now, maybe it's because you're at a crossroads. The Callaway Nexus launch is next month. The military contracts are waiting for your signature. The decisions you make in the coming weeks will determine not just your future, but the future of your technology and its impact on the world." Maverick set down his fork, staring at her. The Nexus launch was public knowledge, but the military contracts were strictly confidential, known only to his executive team and the Pentagon officials involved. "How could you possibly know about those contracts?" he demanded. Wren simply touched her locket in response, and Maverick found himself at a loss for a rational explanation. He'd already run through all the possibilities: corporate espionage, an elaborate prank, a hallucination brought on by stress and isolation, and none of them adequately explained the girl sitting across from him, calmly eating the eggs he'd prepared. "What does any of this have to do with human connection?" he asked, returning to her earlier point. "Business decisions are business decisions." "Are they?" Wren challenged, setting down her fork. "The Nexus technology will change how people interact with each other and with the digital world. The military applications could change warfare forever. These aren't just business decisions, Mr. Callaway. They're human decisions with human consequences." She wiped her mouth with a napkin, surprisingly prim. 5 years ago you would have seen that distinction clearly. You would have questioned the ethical implications, weighed the human cost against the profit margin. That was the Maverick Callaway who said the greatest threat wasn't technology but our willingness to trade human connection for convenience. Maverick pushed his plate away, no longer hungry. "People change," he said defensively. "The market changes. You adapt or you become irrelevant." "Is that what happened with Piper?" Wren asked softly. "Did she become irrelevant when she questioned the surveillance capabilities of the Callaway OS?" Maverick's jaw tightened at the mention of his former friend and co-founder. Piper was idealistic to a fault. She couldn't see the bigger picture. Even to his own ears, the justification sounded hollow. Wren didn't press the point, but her silence felt like judgment all the same. She finished her meal and carried her plate to the sink, rinsing it with a practiced efficiency that spoke of household responsibilities beyond her years. "Thank you for dinner," she said, turning back to him. "It was delicious." Maverick checked the time, 8:30 p.m. "I should get you back to Briar House," he said, making a decision. "I'll drive you myself." He was surprised by his own offer, but the thought of sending this strange, knowing child away in a taxi or with his driver didn't sit right. Ren nodded, accepting his proposal without argument. "I should warn you," she said as they walked toward the garage, "this isn't a one-time visit. The Locket doesn't work that way. Our paths are connected now." Maverick hesitated at the door that led to his collection of luxury vehicles. "What exactly are you saying?" Ren looked up at him, her expression earnest. "I'm saying that whatever began tonight isn't finished. The Locket brought me to you for a reason, and until that reason is fulfilled, our lives will keep intersecting." The garage lights activated automatically as they entered, illuminating Maverick's collection of automotive excellence. A Lamborghini, a vintage Aston Martin, a Tesla Roadster, and several others. Ren's eyes widened slightly, the first time she'd shown genuine surprise all evening. "You could choose any car you want," Maverick said, amused by her reaction, "but I think the Range Rover is the most practical for this trip." He pointed to the sleek black SUV at the end of the row. Ren nodded, following him to the vehicle. As they settled into the buttersoft leather seats, Maverick realized this was the first time in years he'd personally driven someone somewhere. Usually, his driver Terrence handled any transportation needs, allowing Maverick to work during transit. The gates of the villa opened silently as they approached, and soon they were winding down the private road that led to the Pacific Coast Highway. The night was clear, stars visible despite the light pollution from Los Angeles to the east. Ren gave him directions to Briar House, and they drove in silence for several minutes, the purr of the Range Rover's engine the only sound between them. "This car probably cost more than Briar House's annual budget," Ren observed eventually, running her fingers along the dashboard. There was no judgment in her tone, just an acknowledgement of disparity. "Probably," Maverick agreed, feeling a twinge of something that might have been shame. "It's a good car." "I'm sure it is," Ren said. "But it's still just a car." The simple statement carried a weight that made Maverick glance at her. In the dim light from the dashboard, her profile was solemn, the locket gleaming at her throat. "Mrs. Grayson always says that things are just things. They can't love you back." Maverick returned his eyes to the road, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "That's a rather simplistic view," he countered. "Things can represent achievement, progress. They can be tools that improve lives." Ren nodded, conceding the point. "They can be. Is that what your things represent to you, Mr. Calloway? Achievement? Or are they substitutes for what's missing?" The question hung in the air between them as Maverick navigated the coastal highway. In the distance, the lights of Santa Monica glittered along the shoreline, a constellation of human existence. "I've worked hard for what I have," he said finally. "There's nothing wrong with enjoying the fruits of that labor." Ren turned those penetrating eyes on him again. "No, there isn't. But you don't enjoy them, do you?" "Not really. The cars sit in your garage. The rooms in your villa go unused. The view from your infinity pool is something you glance at between emails. These aren't fruits you're savoring, Mr. Calloway. They're trophies gathering dust." The accuracy of her assessment stung, and Maverick found himself gripping the steering wheel more tightly. "For someone so young, you have a lot of opinions about how adults should live their lives," he remarked, unable to keep the edge from his voice. Ren didn't seem bothered by his tone. "The Locket shows me things as they are, not as people pretend them to be. It's a kind of clarity that has nothing to do with age." She pointed ahead. "Turn left at the next light. Briar House is about 2 miles down that road." Maverick followed her directions, turning onto a less traveled street lined with modest homes. The contrast to his own neighborhood was stark. These were houses where people actually lived, with bicycles on porches and basketball hoops in driveways. Briar House stood at the end of a cul-de-sac, a large Victorian structure that had clearly been converted from a single-family home to an institutional residence. Christmas lights still hung from the eaves, though it was well past the season, and a basketball court had been painted onto the driveway. The windows glowed warmly, and as Maverick parked across the street, he could see figures moving inside, girls of various ages in what appeared to be a common room, some watching a movie on a large TV, others engaged in different activities. "I should go in with you," Maverick said, suddenly concerned about how Ren's absence might have been noticed. "Explain where you've been." Ren shook her head. "That would just complicate things. Mrs. Grayson would have questions I can't answer, and you'd probably end up talking to child services. She unbuckled her seatbelt but made no move to exit the car. Thank you for dinner and for the ride. But mostly thank you for listening. Maverick found himself strangely reluctant to see her go. Despite the unsettling nature of their conversation, there had been something refreshing about Wren's directness, her lack of agenda beyond whatever mysterious purpose the Locket had assigned her. Will you be in trouble? He asked. Wren shrugged. Maybe a little. But it was worth it. She reached for the door handle then paused. The Locket will bring us together again soon. When it does, I hope you'll be ready to see what it wants to show you. Before Maverick could respond, she had slipped out of the car and was walking briskly up the path to Briar House. He watched as she approached the front door, wondering if she had a key or would have to explain her absence to gain entry. To his surprise, the door opened before she reached it, and a woman with silver-streaked dark hair appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Grayson, he presumed. There was a brief conversation he couldn't hear, then Wren was ushered inside with a gentle hand on her shoulder. The door closed, and Maverick sat for a moment longer, staring at the old Victorian with its mismatched curtains and chalk drawings on the sidewalk. Something about the scene made his chest ache with an emotion he couldn't quite name. The drive back to his villa was solitary and contemplative, the coastal road nearly empty at this hour. Maverick found himself replaying his conversation with Wren, trying to make sense of the inexplicable knowledge she possessed and the unsettling truths she'd spoken. By all logic, he should dismiss the entire incident as an elaborate hoax or a symptom of his own isolation and stress. Yet the memory of holding the locket, of experiencing his father's death with such visceral clarity, defied rational explanation. As he pulled back into his garage, the sleek vehicles that had once given him such satisfaction seemed suddenly hollow, symbols of achievement that had come at the cost of everything else. The villa too felt different as he re-entered. Its vastness, once a point of pride, now emphasized its emptiness. Maverick wandered through the spaces, seeing them with new eyes, eyes influenced by Wren's perspective. The living room where no one lived. The dining room where no one dined. The guest bedrooms that had never known guests. He found himself in his home office, staring at the digital frame on his desk, the photos cycling through moments from a past that seemed increasingly distant. There was a notification on his computer screen, the Singapore investors expressing concern about his missed call, requesting a reschedule for first thing in the morning. For the first time in his professional life, Maverick found himself considering cancellation rather than accommodation. What would happen if he simply didn't? If he stepped away from the relentless pace he'd maintained for over a decade? The thought was both terrifying and strangely liberating. His gaze fell on a small box tucked away on a bookshelf, a handcrafted wooden container his father had given him for his 18th birthday. Inside were the few personal mementos he'd kept through the years. His mother's piano recital program, his first business card, a dried flower from Valencia's bouquet the night he'd proposed. Sentimental objects he'd hidden away because they didn't fit with the sleek, efficient image he'd cultivated for himself. Maverick opened the box now, fingers brushing over these tangible connections to people who had once mattered to him, people who still mattered if he was honest with himself. Among the items was a folded piece of paper he hadn't looked at in years. He opened it carefully, revealing a handwritten letter from Piper, delivered the day she'd left Callaway Innovations. Maverick, it read, I remember the night we started this company. Remember what you said? That we were going to build technology that brought people together, that enhanced human connection rather than replacing it. Somewhere along the way you've lost sight of that vision. The Maverick I knew would never put profit above people, would never sacrifice privacy for market share. I hope someday you remember who you were, who you still could be. Until then, I can't be part of what Callaway is becoming. With love and hope for your return, Piper. Maverick's hands trembled slightly as he refolded the letter. How had Wren known about the surveillance concerns that had driven Piper away? About the military contracts that would extend that surveillance capability in ways even his executive team didn't fully comprehend? The sharp ping of his phone interrupted his thoughts. Another notification, another demand for his attention. But for once, Maverick didn't reach for it immediately. Instead, he walked to the wall of windows overlooking the ocean, now a vast darkness beneath a star-scattered sky. The Locket had shown him something tonight, whether through magic or through the simple insight of a child who could see what he'd become. The question was what he would do with that insight. As he stood there, caught between the empty luxury of his present and the connected purpose of his past, Maverick made a decision. Tomorrow he would find out more about Briar House and the mysterious girl with the locket. Tomorrow, he would begin to unravel the strangeness that had entered his carefully controlled life. For tonight, he simply stood at the window, allowing himself to really see the view he'd taken for granted for so long. If you're enjoying this video and want more content like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. That way you won't miss out on any of the amazing stories/videos we have coming up. Your support really helps the channel grow and keeps us bringing you more of what you love. Thank you. Morning arrived with sunlight filtering through Maverick's bedroom windows. For the first time in years he hadn't set an alarm. The events of the previous evening played through his mind. The mysterious girl, the inexplicable Locket, the truths spoken over scrambled eggs. With sudden clarity, Maverick knew what he needed to do. He called his assistant. "Dominic, clear my schedule for the next few days. Personal emergency." He ignored the questions that followed, ending the call firmly. After a quick shower, Maverick dressed in his most casual clothes, dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt. The man in the mirror looked different somehow, less polished but more present. The drive to Briar House revealed details he'd missed the night before. Flower beds bordering the walkway, homemade wind chimes, a well-used basketball hoop. Maverick approached the front door, hearing the sounds of life within. When he rang the doorbell, Mrs. Grayson answered, her expression polite but cautious. "My name is Maverick Calloway," he said. "I'm here about Wren." Her expression shifted to something more guarded. "And what is your interest in one of my girls, Mr. Calloway?" The protectiveness in her tone was immediately apparent. "It's complicated," he admitted. "I met her yesterday under unusual circumstances. I'd like to speak with her again." Mrs. Grayson studied him for a long moment, then stepped back. "You'd better come in. But I should warn you, I take the safety of these children very seriously." Inside Briar House, functional furniture showed signs of wear, walls were decorated with children's artwork, and a large dining table could accommodate at least 20. "Wren told me about your visit," Mrs. Grayson said, leading him to a small office. "Though she was vague about how she ended up at your home." She closed the door. "I'd be interested to hear your version." Maverick considered his options. "She appeared at my gate yesterday evening," he began carefully. "She knew things about me she couldn't possibly have known. She showed me something I needed to see." Mrs. Grayson's expression remained neutral. "That sounds rather cryptic. Are you saying an 11-year-old girl somehow made her way to your private residence in Malibu, over 20 miles from here, without assistance?" Before she could say more, there was a soft knock at the door. "Come in," she called, and Wren appeared, still in pajamas printed with stars, the locket gleaming at her throat. "I thought I heard your voice," she said to Maverick. "The locket said you'd come back sooner rather than later." Mrs. Grayson frowned. "Wren, honey, you should be getting ready for school." Wren's gaze remained fixed on Maverick. "He's here about the locket. It's important, more important than school today." The older woman sighed. 30 minutes. Then you need to be on the bus with the others." Once they were alone, Wren settled into the chair Mrs. Grayson had vacated. "You've been thinking about what I said," she observed. "I have. And I have questions," Maverick replied. "How did you get the locket?" Wren's voice softened. "It was my mother's. She said it had been in our family for generations. She gave it to me the day before the accident." Her fingers closed around the pendant. "I didn't understand what she meant until after they were gone. That's when it started showing me things." Maverick leaned forward. "What kinds of things?" Wren's gaze grew distant. "People who needed help. Moments that mattered. Crossroads where a single decision could change everything." She hesitated. "But this time was different. This time the locket kept showing me one specific moment in your future. A moment that hasn't happened yet." "What moment?" Maverick asked. "The Calloway Nexus launch. The military contracts. If they proceed as planned, something terrible happens. Something that changes everything." The weight of her words settled over him. The Nexus technology was his most ambitious project. A system connecting users' digital lives in unprecedented ways. The military applications would generate billions in government contracts. "You're asking me to abandon years of work," he said slowly. Wren shook her head. "I'm asking you to look closer at what you're building, at what it might become in the wrong hands." The Maverick Calloway who started his company would have asked these questions himself. Her words echoed Piper's letter, striking at a truth Maverick had been avoiding for years. He had started with ideals, with a vision of technology that served humanity rather than surveilling it. Somewhere along the way, those ideals had become forgotten. "The launch is in 3 weeks," he said. "Changing course now would cost millions, maybe billions." Wren's gaze never wavered. "What's the cost if you don't?" she asked simply. And in that moment, with perfect clarity, Maverick saw what the locket had been trying to show him, not just who he had been or who he had become, but who he still could be. The next 3 weeks sent shockwaves through the tech industry. First came the announcement that the Callaway Nexus launch was being postponed indefinitely for ethical reconsideration. Then came the news that Maverick had personally vetoed the military contracts. Most surprising was the appointment of Piper Reeves, a estranged co-founder and critic of surveillance technology, as the new chief ethics officer, with a mandate to review every product through the lens of its human impact. The company's stock took an immediate hit, but Maverick found he cared less about that than expected. His reunion with Piper had been awkward at first, years of distance creating a barrier that seemed insurmountable. But as he'd explained his change of heart, carefully omitting the more inexplicable aspects of his encounter with Wren, Piper's skepticism had gradually given way to cautious hope. "The Maverick I knew is still in there somewhere," she'd said. "I thought he was gone for good." Maverick had smiled. "So did I. It took someone with remarkable insight to remind me of who I used to be." It began with donations to Briar House, anonymous at first, then openly acknowledged as Maverick became a regular visitor. New basketball equipment appeared. The ancient heating system was replaced. A college fund was established for each girl. But money, Maverick was learning, was the easiest thing to give. Far more valuable was his time. Afternoons helping with homework, weekends dedicated to field trips, evenings devoted to board games in the newly renovated common room. Mrs. Grayson's skepticism had softened as she'd witnessed the genuine connection forming between the billionaire tech mogul and the orphan girl with the mysterious locket. On a warm Saturday in early spring, 6 weeks after Wren had first appeared at his gate, Maverick found himself back at Briar House for what had become a weekend tradition: pizza and movies with the residents. As the younger girls raced ahead, Wren lingered beside him. "The locket's been quiet lately," she said, touching the pendant. "No new visions, no urgent messages." Maverick glanced down at her. "Is that unusual?" Wren nodded. "It's only happened once before, after I helped an elderly woman reconnect with her estranged daughter. It was like the locket knew its work was done." They paused at the bottom of the porch steps, laughter filtering through the windows above them. "And you think its work with me is done?" Maverick asked. Wren considered this. "The future it showed me, where the Nexus technology was misused, where your military contracts led to surveillance beyond anything you intended, that future doesn't exist anymore. You changed it." She smiled up at him. "But I don't think the locket is finished with us yet. Some connections it creates are meant to last." Later, as twilight settled over the neighborhood, Maverick found himself sitting beside Wren on the porch swing. "I've been thinking about what happens next," he said. "For you. For us. I've spoken with Mrs. Grayson and with your social worker. I've started the process to become a foster parent. If you're amenable, I'd like to apply specifically to foster you." Wren's expression shifted from surprise to careful neutrality. "Why?" she asked simply. "Because you changed my life," he answered honestly. "Because you reminded me of who I was meant to be. Because in some strange way, I think we were meant to find each other." Wren's fingers went to her locket. "The locket doesn't just connect people randomly," she said after a moment. "It creates the connections that are meant to exist, the ones that heal what's broken in both lives." Maverick thought of the empty villa waiting for him, of how different it felt now. No longer a showcase of his success but a potential home, a space that could be filled with purpose and connection. "So what do you think?" he asked. Wren was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, not the wise smile of the locket bearer, but the simple smile of an 11-year-old girl being offered something she had long stopped hoping for. "I think that the locket knew exactly what it was doing when it brought me to your gate that night." As twilight deepened into evening, Maverick felt the final pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known he was solving fall into place. The girl beside him had appeared in his life when he'd lost sight of everything that truly mattered. She had shown him the hollow center of his success, the emptiness of achievement without purpose, the meaninglessness of wealth without connection. And in doing so, she had offered him a chance to reclaim not just who he had been, but who he could still become. The locket gleamed in the gathering darkness, a silent witness to the transformation it had wrought, a reminder that the truest wealth has nothing to do with bank accounts or stock options, and everything to do with the connections we forge and the lives we touch along the way.